Give myself, like, I don't think I'm an oblivious reader, but I must be, because I keep missing these huge.
With the battle axe.
Okay.
Hi, we're the Book Mavens. Welcome back. We are talking about Ship of Destiny, Book 3 in the Liveship Traders Trilogy, and Book 6 in the Realm of the Elderlings series. So, Amanda, what do we think?
Wowie, wow. All right. I enjoyed this trilogy so much more than the Farseer trilogy. And this last book was, wow, what a ride. But
it's a survival story.
It is a survival story. It's a survival story within a pirate adventure within
There's a lot of layers.
Things. I think that's why I loved this trilogy so much. There was just so many fascinating stories happening, and they were interwoven in a way that moved for me a lot faster than the Farseer trilogy.
Yeah, this book was a wild ride. This whole trilogy's been excellent. Just like you said, I think changing the perspectives, going to a third-person perspective as opposed to the first-person perspective, it just gives you a wider scope in terms of what's happening in this new location within the realm, and it's pretty incredible. Her pacing is top-notch.
So if you're reading along with us, now would be the place to pause, because we're going to start talking about what happens in the book and the spoilers. We also want to offer a warning that there are very vivid descriptions of abuse, both physical and sexual, and the trauma that comes from those experiences. So we just want to give you that warning so you're in the right headspace before you watch.
Let's talk about Kenneth. The most complex character I've read in a long time.
Okay, you were correct that he's a Ludluck. He is a Ludluck. And he was kidnapped and kept on the ship to keep Paragon in line, so to keep the bloodline online. And he went through lots, an unspeakable amount of trauma.
So the thing with Ingot and his family, Ingot ended up working on Lucky, who was Kenneth's father's ship. So he gets brought on, and then he systematically takes out the whole crew and ends up taking over the live ship. So there's a legend that's written about Ingot having a live ship, and it's Paragon. So Kenneth on board is sexually assaulted by Ingot repeatedly. And he and Paragon are bound together in such a different way than we see with these other ships, and it's through this trauma. And Kenneth has Paragon kind of take in all of his memories of the pain, but that doesn't actually work. And so you can see this in terms of Kenneth devolving towards the end of the book. He really unravels.
He really spirals down very, very quickly.
Because he has so many balls in the air in terms of his plans to become king of the Pirate Isles. But with the return of Paragon and people finding out who he really is and his connection to Paragon, he cannot allow that to happen. And so he tries to burn Paragon and sink it.
Didn't work.
It did not. Paragon comes back, and then of course that's when he has Fitz's face. So he's been kind of rebuilt. And it's not just that, it's Kenneth dies, and he dies aboard Paragon. And that helps heal Paragon, because not only does he have dueling dragon personalities, but he also had all of Kenneth's painful memories. And so when he's able to absorb Kenneth, Paragon becomes whole. This is an oversimplification of everything that happens.
Oh
with
my
Kenneth.
goodness, yes.
There's a lot of doublespeak that happens, especially when you read Kenneth's storyline in terms of having to really peel back what's actually happening.
And Kenneth is still, for me, such a conflicting gray character, because
He's supposed to be.
I know, but even from
so compelling though.
Even in the last book, if you review the tape, I had such a hard time with Kenneth because he was so incredibly manipulative. And even though I understand where that comes from now, it honestly just makes me, I don't know, it just made me, his whole story makes me incredibly sad.
It is sad.
And I think that's the point. He is a tragic, but then there's so many great commentaries about who people really are versus their public personas, and the way that we idolize like leaders, because you know the tales of Kenneth are going to go on forever, but you know the same, I don't know, he's
but it's not even just about that. You're talking about he's an incredibly intelligent person to be able to do all of those things, how to build the towns to get them to function. He saves that town. I mean, he does tremendous. I don't know why you don't want to give him any credit. He does a lot of things that were necessary and saved lives. To become king, that's why a lot of people do a lot of stuff.
No, and I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying, like,
but
I don't
overshadowed by his trauma. I mean, he's a horribly damaged human being, but you have to imagine what he could have been had that not happened to him. That's what I feel like is just such a waste in terms of all of his potential.
It is a waste,
and it becomes a twisted potential.
But I don't think it's enough to justify. Like, I don't think
it doesn't justify him raping Althea. There's no excuse for that.
A lot of the other stuff he does, like whatever his motivations for doing it, he is incredibly manipulative of Edda and Wintro, and then eventually tries to be manipulative of Althea. Like, he's just a very it's that desire for control. And even when you understand where it comes from,
he saved Wintro. He saved Edda. He saved them. He got her out of that. He got Wintro away from his father so Wintro could become a man. That's why he doesn't speak against Kenneth. Like, I get it. I hate that he doesn't speak against Kenneth over the rape of Althea. But he does these things, and he vastly improves their lives.
Even if somebody has good outcomes or does some good things, people are a combination of good and bad things. We make bad decisions, we make good decisions. And he is a very realistic character in that sense. And even knowing his backstory, it doesn't make more palatable some of the things he does. And
they're all using each other. You can even look at the Bingtown traders. It's all about trying to hold this town together, but also be able to keep their trader status. They're all doing things for personal motivation.
And I'm fine. I just don't like it.
But you always put Kenneth at the top in terms of he's just terrible because he does these things, but all the other characters do them too.
I didn't say he was terrible. I said he was gray. I said he was morally gray.
He is morally gray, but a lot of the characters do.
And here's my thing. I'm not saying that he's the most morally gray character in the book, although he's pretty close. But just in terms of you getting to know their full... There's few characters that you get as deep of a dive into as Kenneth.
Yes, you get it.
So that opens him up for more scrutiny because you get a deep dive into his backstory from multiple perspectives. You get his internal dialogue, you get his action. So he is open to more skepticism because he's more openly dissected in the book.
But you seem to be the most emotionally at Kenneth compared to other characters.
I know, and I don't fully understand why.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. I put my teacher hat on. Give me an example. I mean, a lot more of his internal dialogue than you get with the other characters, so you get to hear his intentions. You don't get that with some of the other characters, so maybe
and it opens him up. And I think that's part of it is because, like, I do see the way he treats Edda and his first mate and Wintro and Vivacia, and he's so.
But the things he does ends up bettering them.
I don't think this is the
Vivacia
same.
had to come together.
These are the same problems I had in the Farseer trilogy.
It wouldn't have happened without him.
Yeah, but this is the whole thing I had in the Farseer trilogy too. And everybody's like, "Oh, Fitz, this is what's best for you," and blah blah blah. It's a very slippery slope for me when somebody starts telling you what's best for them and it's all for good. Like,
I don't think he does it quite to the same level as. I mean, like,
no, he said no because here's my thing. Kenneth is motivated by what is good for Kenneth. And he will lie to them, because even at the end, Paragon straight up, bald-faced lies to Edda. Yes, he loved you.
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of how much he could love anybody, which I think is honest, because Kenneth couldn't love anyone. He couldn't. But that's his trauma. You can't blame him for the fact that he can't emotionally connect with anybody because
I don't blame him for his trauma, but I don't think that gives you a blanket excuse for.
But look what he did for her. You act like he abused her in some way. He didn't. He elevated her. She had status on his ship. Everybody on that ship respected her. She is now queen of the Pirate Isles, pregnant with his child that's now going to elevate her beyond her wildest imaginings. He set her up in a secure position for life. That's what he did. And you could say that it's by his own internal motivations, but those are the results. She could never have done that without him.
Yes. Well, you talk about trauma.
Well, they're all young.
But here's the thing, you talk about trauma, but you're less excusing
Wintro's
trauma.
Not the same as Kenneth.
Kenneth is the one who...
For years.
Kenneth is the one who saved him from his father. Kenneth is the one who helped him become a man. And then Althea, who he barely knows, He knows it's his aunt, but he barely knows her. He barely has a relationship with her.
Mm-hmm.
And you're willing to forgive all kinds of things in Kenneth, but you're not willing to forgive it in Winthrop.
Because that's his family, and he isn't a morally gray character. He's supposed to be on this superior level because that's how he's been written.
He barely knows
He's
her.
Weak.
He barely
He's
knows.
a weak character.
He's 15.
He's a weak character.
He's 15.
We talk about Malta being able to become greater than she is, and you look at all these things that Winthrop becoming a man and doing all of these things.
Well, Malta does a lot of stuff I don't like either, but I'm saying she grows a lot from her very materialistic, self-centered self too.
Winthrop is just sanctimonious and judgy. And I dislike Winthrop tremendously. He judges his aunt for having a sexual relationship with Brashen. It's none of his damn business.
Okay.
He is.
Listen, I think maybe that's part of it too, is like the natural inclination. But this is real, right? When you have these like gut reactions based on your life experience or like the way you were raised or whatever, and then you really analyze that. I think that is mature. That is how you mature. Is when you look at the way you look at something or the way you reacted and you really dissect it and you say, why did I react that way? Why did I find that distasteful? And then you either decide if that is viable or not. And I think that's why I find her character so fascinating, is because, again, they're not all good and they're not all bad. They make bad decisions. There are horrible things that happen to them, and they all respond to their trauma in different ways. And I find that I think you love these characters the way you love real people in your life, because they're flawed and they do things that you don't like. And like, I mean, there are people who do things in your life and you don't like it, but you still love them.
Yeah.
And
I don't love Winthrop.
Well, and I don't love Kenneth, so it's fine.
Very good.
There you go.
Well, Kenneth's a catalyst. He's a catalyst for the events that affect every single one of these characters.
I don't know why. I don't know why I find Kenneth
I'm
so
just trying to like pinpoint something. I mean, for me, Winthrop was not staying up for that. I thought he was before that, but after that, I said I washed my hands with him.
I hated that. I hated that.
Really did.
But I
never loved him to begin with.
Right.
So that was just the icing on the cake.
And you liked Kenneth in the beginning, and thus
I do. I still like him. I find him a compelling character. I do not love him in terms of thinking he's a great guy. I love him as a character.
I think he's a compelling character. It's just a character, and maybe
just so well written.
Because and it is well written, and I think maybe
He's the best written so far.
The different characters are, I think we all identify with different parts of different characters too. And that's why some of them, when they make a
girl power in here too,
right, when they make a bad decision or when they stand up and they have growth of their personal character, you really cheer for them, or you're really gutted because these characters are so real that you identify with different parts of them. You identify with, like, I in a lot of ways, I identify with Wintrop's just naive nature a little bit in the beginning, in the very first books. He's very naive and he doesn't understand, and he's really trying to figure out, like in this book, he really recognized, what he has this moment where he realizes he's been fighting it. Like, if he really believes that everything is Saw's will, then he's really been fighting against it that whole time, and that maybe this is his will, and while the will is not what he wanted, that's a huge moment for Wintrop's character. And that's when he really steps into that leadership position. He's going to captain Vivacia, he's going to help Etta. Like, that's a big moment for him that he's been building to this whole time, because he spent 7 years or something like that thinking he was going to be in a monastery.
No, not even. He went when he was 9.
So was that like 5 years or something like that?
I think like 14 when he comes out.
Yeah.
Maybe
so he spent a long time thinking he was going to be, and this is pretty formative years. And I think we just identify with different parts of these characters. Like, there's a part of Althea that I understand because, there's a part of you that's not living a traditional, or the quote unquote life, that a woman is supposed to have. Like, I don't know. I think there are different, and I think that's why they disappoint you so. Like, I think that's why the disappointments feel so sharp and acute, and why we celebrate them so much when they have these moments of growth, is because we see them in ourselves.
Well, I mean, Althea in particular does show a lot of growth. She is probably, to me, the most steady in terms of the things that she does. She's always trying to do things for the right reasons. And Brashen as well. You see them there, they have clear, defined goals, which makes them not the most interesting overall, I think, for all of them.
I think in some ways they're like a touch point in the story. because they remain fairly constant in their trajectory, it allows you to look, it gives you a perspective point on some of the other stories.
Well, and I like her internalized growth in terms of being a woman and what that means in this world, and for her to be comfortable with herself and to let go of the shame in terms of her first sexual experience, which wasn't okay, and everything else, and then finding a healthy relationship with Brashen, a place where she can be respected, and why she would struggle against that and be afraid of those things. Those are all very relatable. And then, of course, her sexual assault by Kenneth, for anybody who is a rape survivor, incredibly relatable for that. To talking about the nightmares, the unwillingness to be touched even by somebody you love, and you really see her struggle with that kind of trauma, which is tremendous. Robin Hobb writes that kind of trauma extremely well. Even Kenneth's sexual assault when he is a very young boy, you can see how it directs his emotional connections with the people around him, or why he can't connect emotionally, and why he is stunted in that way. He is a horrifically damaged human being, and you can't help but feel sorry for him. And one of the big characters that I actually cried reading it was talking about his mother, who had her tongue cut out, and when they go and they get her, Brashen and Paragon go and get her and bring her, and she holds him while he dies on that ship, and that was very moving for me, because she loves him and she knows what he is, she knows what happened to him, and that she holds him while he dies. I think that's very moving.
I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to start with Paragon.
Okay. Well, Paragon, we know now for sure that he had two wizardwood
and two
cocoons. Yeah, so 2 wizardwood cocoons were used to create him.
I don't know why I don't pick up on these. I guess because I'm not looking for them. I keep missing these connections to the farce.
Did you not realize that?
I just no, I didn't.
Amber fixes his face. No, not only does she fix his face and give him back his eyesight, but she changes his entire physique. And Paragon asks her to give him a face that she loves. And Amber loves Fitz. So I carved Fitz's face. That's Paragon's new face. It's Fitz.
I don't think of myself I don't think I'm an oblivious reader, but I must be, because I keep missing these huge.
With the battle axe, she literally carves the bucks.
Okay, and now that you say it, I was like, oh yeah, Fitz's weapon of choice was an axe. She talks about how she lost the love of her life,
which is Fitz. I honestly think that the Fool could actually really be female.
I think she could be too. It's so hard.
I do like that it's kind of gender ambiguous, though. It's kind of fun.
I do think it makes it a little hard to talk about when you're tracking, because when I talk about the Fool, it's a very different character to me than Amber, because they have put themselves in a very different they're just in a very different role. The Fool is a position within the king's court. And so there is responsibilities that come with that. And Amber, because she has so much more autonomy, she's able to, disguise herself and go amongst the tattooed. She puts herself on the ship as a bead carver. She's able to operate in a lot more realms as Amber, which I think also just has something to do with being in Beantown versus when she was being the Fool in the king's court.
I think there's a lot to do also with her physical metamorphosis that she goes through. That she looks different, but I don't know, she's described as being super androgynous to me. They never say that she's beautiful, but there's something striking about her. So which I think obviously works for her in terms of disguising her sex, or his sex.
I'm very interested in their crown. Sex. The crown that they talked about. Okay, so when they go get Ingot's treasure, Paragon says, you can have anything you want, Amber. You're my dear friend. You get whatever you want, no questions asked. She finds this crown, and it's carved. It has roosters on it. It had a place where plumage would have been. Of course, there's no, plumage on it at this point.
Well, the rooster's tied to the Elderlings. That was the...
Right.
Yeah.
And she said, and she's like, do you remember this? And he goes, I remember they weren't an Elderling, the person who wore that crown. And she's like, I know who it is, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh.
I don't know. She still has a lot of cards to play in her deck.
I I think the Fool, which I see now is the connecting character between all these stories. I totally see why. I think they are the most interesting characters. So Bolt is the dragon memories that live in Vivacia. But Bolt basically tries to take over and destroy Vivacia and thus destroy Wintro. But, you know...
But that's because she doesn't... The problem with Bolt is... Well, the problem with being a live ship in general is that they're dead. So the only thing they have, because they can't fly as dragons, they have all of these memories. It sounds like a horrible existence, to be honest.
So she's an understandable character, but it's still like...
But it's not just that. She's trying to do whatever it's going to take to be able to get the serpents. The serpents have been wandering around looking for people who have those memories of these previous lives, and they're dying. And she is just desperate to save her species. Yeah. That's what Bolt is. And Bolt is hard to like because she's not a very sympathetic character towards the humans, but this is a race against time to save their species, and I have to respect that.
I do too.
I think they had the most compelling story of the entire book, to be honest.
I'm not going to lie to you, because
saving a species.
The very first little blip in the very first book is about the serpents, and you're like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't get this.
The connection.
But that's what I'm saying, like, such an original tale.
But just to do anything that they know that this is it. This is the last chance for them to survive. And to just watch them and they talk about literally having to cannibalize each other just to have enough strength. When they've died, they're not killing each other. But to be able to make it. And then for Tintaglia to see that the river that they have to swim up has been so damaged by that volcano, all of this.
And time.
I mean, just that they can't get up the river. So she's desperate for help. So she... aids these humans in order for them to build a lock system in order to get these serpents to the area where they need to be to cocoon. And that this river was never going to be big enough, and so many of them die getting there. It's really just, it's a survival story.
It is a survival story. I enjoyed the writing of how these dual and warring personalities resolve themselves, because they talked about it several times. Vivacia said the same thing. This is my true self. This is my whole self. Where the dragon and the memories of the traders who had died on their decks, like where all those pieces come together to create this kind of complete personality. It takes most of the book for both Paragon and Vivacia to like come to terms with what they are, like what Wizardwood is and what the dragons mean, and but just what that
overall shock,
right? The shock.
Paragon already knew.
Yeah,
he'd known for a long time.
I just found that so imaginative. I mean, Robin Hobb is a genius. The originality of this series, just kept me going. Like there was I never felt like I knew what was going to happen. No, like trope that I felt was being.
Oh, well, I disagree, but we'll go back to that.
I was going to say, it didn't feel that way to me when I read it. And maybe it's because we were switching perspectives so much.
Well, I mean, the ships, everything with the ships was fine. The part that I felt delved into a used trope is Althea and Brashen's relationship. That played out. It's very traditional. It was enjoyable, but their romance is something in terms of how they come apart and come together was very traditional.
For both of them, I liked it very much because Althea takes on the role that Wintro took for me in the earlier books, about how so many other people's decisions were dictating their life. And at the end, Althea makes her own choice. Like there's a beautiful line where she's talking to Brash and he's like, well, aren't you going to take Vivacia? And she goes, I can't. It's Wintro's ship. If I took it, it would be exactly what Kyle did to me, and that's wrong. Like she's always, I felt like, been a very mature character in the way she wanted to be the person worthy of captaining Vivacia. That's like most of why she goes out in the first and large parts of the second book. She goes out trying to gain experience, trying to become the sailor that is worthy of Vivacia and to get Vivacia back. And then when she realizes that there's no place for her on Vivacia, it's really hard. And Vivacia has a beautiful line, like, there can be love without need. Guys, what a great line. It was so good. But I just think Althea is such a wonderful character, and I think Brashen offers her a equal partnership and an ability to continue to do something she loves. And I think for both of them, it's not the life they thought they were going to have, but they are building a good life that I think in the end will be more than they imagined they could have, which I really liked that.
Well, I like how non-traditional it is, and I respect Althea because she's doing things that women in Bingtown don't traditionally do. Yes, there's some equality in terms of being a trader within Bingtown between men and women, but her captaining a ship is not done. That we really don't see any women taking on those kind of roles, and that she figures it out for herself and builds the confidence to be able to kind of co-captain with Brashen aboard the Paragon. I think that's very important for character development. And of course, her trauma and feelings towards Kenneth, which are completely understandable. I'd want to kill him too, because he rapes her.
I think the hardest part about Althea's story there at the end is the parts of the book where she's realizing that she will never get vengeance, that vengeance is not a thing that will be open to her. Because Kyle is already gone. Now that when Kenneth dies, she recognizes that she'll never be able to really expose him for what he was, either of them really.
No. So there's a lot of politics as well going in to this book. I mean, politics have been running through this continuously, but the whole reshaping of Bingtown in terms of getting rid of slavery, working with, which was Kenneth, the Pirate King, in terms of shipping goods to Jamelia and back, and kind of like rebuilding this charter situation was fascinating and very understandable. It kind of reminded me of like what it would have been like in terms of like American history, like setting up the 13 colonies and making a decision to be free. Like I found that there was a lot of parallels with historical events, that would be how it would go. You'd have people have to come together and put aside those differences to kind of band together to cause change.
Okay, so really his character, wow, what a journey. In the one book, really, because it all happens.
Well, she's the companion to the satrap.
Yeah.
And she ends up in Bingtown and sets herself up to kind of be the voice piece for Jamelia. And she definitely trusts the wrong people in terms of trying to do that. But I have to respect a girl for looking for an opportunity in which to seize power. And she wasn't doing it primarily to be selfish. She really thought she was going to be the best for the job. She gets knocked down several pegs, but I enjoyed watching.
I think she had a dual motivation.
Journey.
I think she was trying to survive, number one. Totally, I mean, I got it.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, she definitely...
She didn't want to just survive. She wanted to survive at the top.
Education and experience they're not the same thing.
Coming to their own, Kefria taking on a leadership position. Ronica there is an advisor, like more of an advisory
and
person.
I liked that Ronica recognizes that there was no going back to the way things work, that Bingtown would never be the same. And Ronica really drives it towards something that is going to be sustainable. And I admire that. I think particularly in the COVID times, I said it a lot in the school year, that there's this huge push to go back to the way things were, instead of taking a moment to evaluate where we are and looking at, are there things that we can change? Is there knowledge that we've gained out of this? Are there practices that we've gained out of this that are valuable? Like, things don't necessarily have to go back to the way they are because the way they were, to be good, or there mayhaps this is an opportunity to look and see if there are better ways of moving forward, if there are better ways of doing things. And I think I liked that in Ronica, that she recognizes that all people, the three ships people, the tattooed, even the new traders, that there were going to have to be some significant power shift.
It's not even a power shift. It's also about going back to what Bingtown stood for to begin with, in terms of people looking for a chance to succeed. And so they lost that in terms of holding it all within the traders, in terms of having this super secret relationship with the Rainwild traders and all of these things. And it isolated everyone else when we needed to come together. And had they come together and allowed for new blood, essentially, to come in, you could have kept out the new traders and slavery and all of those things. So it's like the whole system had to crumble in order to be built back up to allow for more flexibility in terms of allowing everyone to grow, not just one select group. And I think that's That's really
moving
important.
forward
Regarding
in
the dragons.
Yes, in the relationship with the dragons. Okay, let's talk about the dragons. Let's talk about the dragons.
Intaglia is a queen, and I'm talking about Snap Snap. She is a queen, capitalized Q.
I love when she's talking to Malta. She's like, no. Females are queens. You need to you need to get it together, girl, and you need to make your own decisions. And I'm like, but
what didn't you like about?
Okay, here's my thing. Okay, not to be the human in the room. I thought it's not that I didn't like them. I think I found.
Well, she's the only one.
Well, yeah, she's the only true dragon.
She's the only one.
That's what makes it so unique and interesting. Is there's like the altruistic guardian version, like idealized that people have.
I love the arrogance. I like the arrogant dragon.
No,
she's
and I think that's maybe
arrogant.
why I came. I don't know. I think that's why she's always telling him how like, your life doesn't matter.
How it is. She's telling him how it is. What do they
how
matter?
It is to her.
Well, without her, this is a big thing, and they act like that she's horrible. She saves them all.
She does. But
she beats back the Chalcedonians.
She might be the most Beantown character of all the Beantown characters, because she doesn't do it without a bargain.
That leads us to our conversation about Elderlings as well, in terms of what Elderlings really were. They were humans who lived in close proximity with dragons in this symbiotic relationship they had, and with that exposure to the dragons, some of that essence transfers. So they have a longer life. They also take on some of the characteristics of the dragons, which includes the scaling. And I think that's very different, because when they talk about the Rainwilders in terms of appearance, some of them are talking about having like these wobbly bits, which doesn't match the dragons. But I think because Rain spends so much time down there around her,
the scaling.
The
describes
scales.
His is scaling.
Some of them have scales, but his are all scales. He doesn't have like the wobbly, warty bits.
Yeah. He thinks it's just a matter of time, but I think you're right. I think it's because he spends the majority of his time in the dragon chamber with her, and
Selden starts developing them as well, and Malta, because of her connection with the dragon. But Malta becomes capital queen as well.
Malta really she really comes into her own in this book.
She started using her powers for good instead of evil.
She did. I did like that she still had those moments where she was a child. Like, she makes a comment, I think to Edda, she makes a sassy comment, and Edda just looks at her, and Malta's like, yeah, okay.
Slaps her down.
Edda's like, even Malta's like, all right, that's kind of petty. I shouldn't have done that. But again, I think reminding yourself, Malta is 13, 14. Wintro is 15 in this book.
They're very young. All of them.
They all are very young. I think when you look over the experience they've had in these books, you start to picture them as much older. And Robin Hobb very skillfully reminds you of their age, especially towards the end of the book. Yeah. And you're like, oh my gosh. Because now, and now they're all in these positions of real authority and autonomy in their own lives, which is so different than where they started in the books.
This is the trilogy.
No, I think there's going to be more. I think these characters are going to come back, because
maybe in terms of the Rainwild ones, I feel like there's more that's going to happen with somebody like Selden versus everyone else.
Well, because one of the series is about dragons, so I imagine that that's
going to be that other city, because it's very distracting.
Okay,
I don't listen to audiobooks, so to have that happen, I'm like, I was like, what is happening?
I didn't love the Farseer audiobooks.
No, the reader is super pompous sounding.
And I liked these better, but I will say the accent choices are interesting, which I think this is the trouble with when you do audiobooks or when something is made into a movie. What you are hearing in your head and what somebody else says is just sometimes like, oh, is that how you're saying that? Or like, wow, that was a very intentional choice you made with that accent and you've really stuck to it. Okay. All right. Like,
little Transylvanian, Jamilian.
Every time Cerelia talks, I'm like, oh, okay.
I just hear Dracula. I want to suck your blood. You Beantown traders. Like, it's just ridiculous. It just made me laugh the entire.
Every time one of them starts.
Or the satrap. We haven't even talked about him. Ugh.
It's because I don't. He's like, ugh, he's just an icky character.
I mean, to me, he was only really there to serve as a point for Malta's growth. I mean, honestly, because she comes into her own dealing with him and realizes that she has to grow up a little bit. How should we rate this book? And then the trilogy overall.
Oh, the trilogy overall.
Oh, it's it's sitting very comfortably, probably my top 5 favorite fantasy.
It's very good. I would recommend
series.
this series to many a friend.
It just has something in there, I think, for everyone. So good. And I really like how she writes her non-human animals. I love Night Eyes in the Farseer trilogy. I love Tintaglia. The weasel? Is it a weasel?
Yeah, I love the weasel.
You know, I like that she writes them, and I really, really enjoyed that she went very almost traditional in terms of her dragon. And because I really like that. The arrogant, powerful being. I was there for that. I really, really liked it.
I'm rating this book as a box of Pretty Butts, every flavor beans. Because it's an adventure. A box of those is an adventure because you don't know what you're going to get. And at one moment you get something really sweet like a watermelon, and then the next minute you get something like grass, or only because there are moments where you don't know what you're going to get in this story, because there are really sweet moments and there are really hard, painful moments, and I feel like they're all mixed in there together, and but I still enjoy the experience.
That is true. This is, I guess, maybe a little bit of a roulette game for you.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know what any of these books are about. I'm totally blind going into these.
As am I. I don't do anything. You read the backs. I won't even read the backs.
Yeah, that's true, because we did learn pretty early. They really spoil stuff on the back of the book. So after the first book of a trilogy, you really shouldn't read the backs, because it will just all kinds of things away.
It was thoroughly enjoyable. In terms of food, I mean, I would just say very subjective. In terms of that, there are things like that she really enjoyed about the book that I didn't like so much, but there's something there for everyone. So I would just maybe say subjectively, like, your favorite foods, and then include some things that perhaps you don't love, some odd flavors. And that's kind of what this book is. I do feel like this is something that anybody could get something out of the story.
Sounds like you're describing a potluck.
A potluck. It's a potluck book. Maybe that works. The more complex they get, I always feel like it's easier to identify like a food with like a first or second book. But when you're concluding all of this, they just become so much more complex. And Robin Hobb just writes really complex books, and they just become larger in scale as you move forward. So they just become more and more complex. So, yeah, maybe a potluck. Everybody's bringing something to the table. All right, so that concludes our discussion about Book 3, Ship of Destiny, in the Liveship Traders Trilogy, which was Book 6. Next week, we will be talking about Book 7, which is Book 1 in the Tawny Man Trilogy, Fool's Errand. And like and subscribe, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.
Bye.
Bye. Somebody's being disruptive and jumping on the filming table.
No,
Had to be banished.